Hi everyone, welcome to our first episode as part of the series that will take place on publicdomain.garden. Publicdomain.garden is a project that is initiated by Walkin Studios. The project looks to extend views and attitudes towards what public domain and public space means today, online and offline, and the hybrid world we live in. Walkin Studios is a non-profit artist studios and residency space in Bangalore, India, that supports the development of multidisciplinary practices, cultural exchanges, and media art. What we're going to talk about today is public domain as a word, the becoming of digital commons, and how do we make decisions.
Today we have two very special guests, Mai Ishikawa Sutton and Padmini Ray. Mai is an organizer and writer focused on the digital commons and other intersections between network technologies and solidarity economy. They are a co-founder and editor of COMPOST magazine, an online magazine about and for the digital commons, and a contributor to Hypha Worker Co-operative. They are also the director of fellowships at DWeb Camp and a digital commons fellow with Commons Network. Padmini Ray is the founder of Design Beku, a collective that emerged from the desire to explore how technology and design can be decolonial, local, and ethical. Today we welcome both Mai and Padmini here with us to have a conversation. Okay, yes. So you both work with communities and with publics and create infrastructures for publics. And what is the most exciting aspect about public space? So, Mai, would you like to answer first?
Sure. I think the most exciting thing about public space is that it enables people to be, what's the term? I feel like saying be themselves is kind of tacky and kind of cheesy, but it is like, it kind of is this kind of, in a way, equalizer. Like when anyone is welcome into a space, it kind of forces people to kind of, I think in the right type of public space, like enables them to be honest and kind of bear themselves in a way. Like when I think about the library, when I think about a great public park, or even in privately owned public spaces, that because everyone is welcome, it kind of melts away, I think, kind of class distinctions too, and kind of like distinctions of hierarchies in certain ways. And I think again, like if people don't feel safe in that public space, I don't think it's actually really a public space in certain ways. And so if you are somebody that would otherwise be more, targeted, if you're a woman, if you're a trans person, if, whatever, if you're poor, like that is not a public space for you if you don't feel safe and you are not accepted in that space, right? And I think because of that, if you're an elite person who's in this space too, you kind of have to grapple with, I think, that stark reality of your power in a public space. And so I think that kind of like convergence of humans being able to be with each other, I think, and Sultana, you've said this a lot with, you're thinking about public spaces, but that kind of like serendipitous happening is really important, because so many of our interactions are mediated, whether that's digital or private, like, through like at a mall or something, like it's mediated through exchange and money, or online. It's like the whole design interface of how we're supposed to interact is like designed for certain ways of harvesting our data, right? But in an actual public space, when things can just kind of happen, I think that is like where really beautiful things happen. And it just, it's kind of like, I think you also said this in your description, but it's kind of resistant to power. I really like that, because it's like power is control. And if you have a space where things just happen, or, sort of without control, then it's, you can't do anything with that. Like you can't control those interactions. You can't sort of like box people in. And so maybe this is too vague of an answer, but I think it's just kind of like that, like, you know, because I think I really hate the distinction between like nature and human infrastructure. I think, you know, we've like made this division in our mind, but I think in our natural ecosystems, like serendipitous things and just happenings like happen all the time. And I think the more we can have those types of just things bouncing into each other and things and interactions happening, I think it's like you're kind of blurring the boundaries of human and nature, between classes, between, you know, all of these kind of boundaries that we just kind of like create.
That's the ideal kind of public space in a way. I mean, that's what I feel like, okay, that's something that I could say that, okay, I would like to move towards that. Or this utopian idea. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of nuance and things inside it, but yes. Okay,
So I mean, I just want to like see some. I mean, I
Yes.
find it also interesting how you were kind of talking about when you think about consensus, um, about kind of leveling like voices in some way, of empowering people who are not voicing their opinions, or like kind of stepping people who are voicing their opinions too much a little lesser. And I mean, it's somewhere similar to a public space, I guess. Like when you enter there, you're all just there, and that is it. Which is interesting.
Yeah. There's a really sort of like very important point that you brought up, which was about the erotic in the public, or like the aspect of safety and being able to be ourselves. I mean, that's also something that we spoke about, and I just want to maybe hear a little bit more on that, and then we can speak about
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. I think that feeling that like the power of the erotic, as Audre Lorde talks about, is this like just like feeling so in tune with your body and your like values and your heart, with the activities that you're doing. Like that raw feeling is so like alienated from us, you know, because of capitalism and consumerist culture, they want to sell good feeling to us, right? And so like the whole system is designed so people don't feel like they have control, that they feel good in their bodies, because the ways that you know, it's not like one person is making this, but it's like the whole like system is designed for us to like, you know, buy the right outfit or buy the right car or, you know, house or whatever to make us feel like we are whole or, you know, safe. And I think an ideal public space does that. Like it's not only just about like being there, but also being able to like participate in creating that public space. Like, how do I feel like I can be in dialogue with the people who are, you know, gardening in that park, you know, or who are, how can I like feel like I can support the construction of new bike lanes? I'm just thinking of things, but you know, it's like, it's just that kind of like, how do I feel like connected to the people around me? And I think I really like want to think about like taxes in a way as like a gift economy. Like, you know, I think I like in the US, like there's so many people who are just so against taxes, right? It's like kind of very emboldened in this like political ideology, because like people I think feel exploited. Like they're giving so much money into this black box, and then a lot of it goes to the military in the United States, a huge portion of it. And then our roads are crumbling, our schools are crumbling, you know, like people don't see what they're, you know, I don't like putting it this way, but like kind of like what they're paying for, you know. And I think I wish like tax day was like this day where we like celebrated our public infrastructure. We're like, oh, you know, like I put this money in, my hard-earned money or whatever, and I can see that now this road is fixed. Now like they're teaching this really cool cooking class in my kids' school, or you know, something like that, right? Like to kind of like see how you're contributing. And I think it's like that, like feeling good like really needs to be the core of like public space and public infrastructure. And that's like it's it's divorced on purpose by a lot of people, I think, because like privatization enables that, like, again, that feeling being sold back to us instead of us being able to like make it ourselves.
Thank you for that answer. Really, yeah, feeling good at the center of it. Yes, there's something actually quite inherently feeling good about being in public spaces. At least I have always felt it like my whole life, even like just traveling in trains, on buses, and being on station platforms, seeing people. There's something inherently quite nice about being out and in public. Like it's like you get to be out and you can feel whatever you want, however you want, and it's quite an empowering thing. And we are not. I mean, we don't frame it like this. We don't talk about it in this way. I mean, I would never think of feeling good in public spaces in the same sentence. You know, it's like, well, you know, this is more about like rights and things. And I mean, it's like, how do we think about it or frame it? Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that Mai said. And I think just to kind of maybe extrapolate kind of from what she was saying, I think two things. One thing that I find.
Wait, don't extrapolate from what you said. Like, about what do you like? You'd like to hear. What do you like to hear?
What I was going to say is that we're thinking along the same tracks. So I'm just kind of like riffing on that, which is what I think. So yeah, so I think something that I think is really, I guess, radical about public space is that it allows for various versions of various imaginations to coexist at the same time, right? Like, so I can inhabit a park and somebody else can inhabit a park, and what that park means to us are actually maybe completely two radical things. Like, I might be a mother with a baby and a pram, and for me it's a place to, you know, kind of get out of the house with my baby and, like, you know, kind of see the outside world, because I've been inside looking after a baby all the time. And, you know, two lovers, like, it's obviously a very different space, right? And so I think what I find really, like, I think the radical potential of public space is that it can be made anything that you want it to. And I think, you know, Fred Moten's like idea of the undercommons is like really powerful, that with regards to this, right? Because what he talks about is this idea of, you know, kind of spaces that are not the academy, that are spaces of education for, say, Black radical thought, right? And I think in very kind of similar ways, we see in India, kind of with the Ambedkarite movement, like, you know, kind of pavements, jawls, you know, like spaces just being transformed into these spaces where, you know, people are becoming more empowered because they have a, you know, more profound sense of who they are, their identity, because of, you know, the teachings that they're kind of, you know, kind of understanding and learning. So I just love the fact, and India is really kind of fabulous in this way, I have to say, that, you know, everything happens on a pavement. Like, people piss, people shit, people live on them, people, I mean, I think it's profoundly unfortunate that we live in a country where people have to live on pavements, but it is also a radically public space that people kind of, you know, build with their imaginations. And I think actually what is interesting, and I think this is what I meant when I said I was kind of extrapolating on what Mai was saying, is that how the power differential, not only is it a leveling space, it can actually like turn really quite subtly. And I think, I can't remember whether I mentioned this yesterday when we were talking, but I recently went to this art exhibition in a space which is, it's located in urban slum. The people who have created that space or who are renting that space are very aware of the space, and they've been working in that neighborhood for ages, and they have like profound relationships with people in that community, which is why for them inhabiting that space is fine. And it was really interesting because my auto rickshaw kind of like left me outside this long lane that leads into it, which is a slum. And I guess, I mean, my driver was like, "Oh, are you sure this is where you want to go?" Because it didn't look like the kind of space that somebody like me would go to. And what I thought was really interesting is that as I walked through the space, I definitely felt that I didn't have a right to be there. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like that is not my public space to inhabit, right? And I think, so just the power of, you know, this kind of, you know, the slum, which was kind of lined with houses, and, you know, they're like animals and ducks and hens running around and, kind of women kind of cooking and all of that. And I felt like this is not my space to be, and that's okay. And I think that's really kind of wonderful that, and it's not like I was feeling threatened or unsafe, nothing like that. I was actually quite enjoying it, but I also felt that this is not my space, and that's fine. Like, I, as a privileged person, should not be allowed to take up space anywhere I want, right? And I think because it's a public space, that can happen, right? Like, because there's no other kind of external force that's forcing me to think about this space in a certain way. So that space has been imagined by the people who live there a certain way, and it is their imagination that characterizes the space. And I think that is just really freeing, that can happen in public space, right? Like, it can't happen in any kind of private space. It can't happen online, right? Like, I can, and we had a bit of a kind of a conversation about this yesterday, right? Like, about like, can I make a social media platform kind of bend to my will and like use it as a place for activism? And I think we all try and we want to and all of that, but we do know that it's difficult. Maybe you can, but it's incredibly challenging to do so, right? And so I think what really infuriates me about the web today is just a lack of imagination. Like, just like, why are we not capable of imagining different digital spaces? And actually, I think in that sense, the non-digital world has maybe something to teach us about how to kind of radically reimagine spaces that we inhabit. And that is what makes it truly public, if it allows for that imagination to run riot, so to speak.
Okay, so should we wait for cool. So you have worked and thought about how to create alternative decision-making structures in collectives or communities or organizations. Can you tell us something that you have discovered on this journey? What works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, I think what doesn't work, this might be obvious, but I think, what was it? Yeah, just this question of like, who is welcome to express themselves, and kind of like the assumption of whose interests you're able to accept, I guess. Like, this comes from projects where they were too open in a way, like, in that I think like this is a major issue, I think, in the whole like free speech debate in the United States, but it's like, is it free speech to be an asshole to other people, and to actually make a space unwelcoming and like terrible for people who are already traumatized by a system in which they're not ever welcome or feeling space? Like, that's that question. I've been in projects where having to accept everybody's opinions means that we don't go anywhere, because there's like people who just fundamentally don't agree with making the whole space welcoming to everybody involved, right? And for some, that means changing their behavior. And I think that particularly is the case for people who have been traditionally privileged, who don't feel like they want to change their behavior or change their idea of what is acceptable behavior, right? And so I think for any project, for you to be able to like have any collective movement forward, is to identify what are your values, like what are your shared values, and to have to go through the process of identifying what is like the kind of like lowest common denominator, I guess, of things you agree on, to then move forward from there. Because sometimes like you don't need to agree on every little thing politically or ethically or whatever, but if you at least have like some fundamental things like, we will be respectful to each other. We will, if it's like a cooperative or something, we will, vote in these ways that is equitable. Or we will share the benefits of our project, equitably, or something like that, right? Like, those agreements need to be made up front, because you can't make decisions together unless you have those things kind of decided at the forefront. And, like I see even like the US Constitution as an experiment, and also an experiment that was designed by white slave owning men whose, wives couldn't vote, and, like they were rich. And like, it's really interesting that we are continuing to operate like kind of our like the fundamental like agreement about the society that I live in is like based on this very like old system that was like designed by these very like biased humans from like over like 200 years ago. So like it's I think like what it is that you agree on, kind of just seeing what it is that it is, and like actually deciding if you can be in community with these people. Because if you can't, then what, like you can't make any decisions. If you just are just like if some people just fundamentally disagree or don't see other people as like as equal, remotely equal as them. So I think it's like a tough conversation to have, but I think that's like always the first step.
Thank you. Yes. It popped a lot of thoughts and triggered a lot of neuronal action in my head, connecting with also what we were speaking before earlier with Padmini and talking about like what radical openness does as which is deterring, actual meaningful work. Okay, so I will just go to my conversation, my question for
this
Padmini.
Question of free speech or expressing is
yes, exactly.
Is here this kind of contention.
It's a big question, and we don't have an answer to, and the whole world is just every day asking this question in one way or the other. Like, okay, now Elon Musk will buy Twitter because for this reason, because it's just like okay, I mean we we're nowhere with this. And then when you were saying this, and I was thinking about like for every sentence you were saying, I was thinking about like the context here, and like the idea that we were thinking about yesterday about the publics, about the multiple publics. So what does it mean to build for communities? And how do you navigate the hierarchies that get created, for example, in your work in Channapatna, where there exists a knowledge hierarchy? You are taking something to the community.
Sure. So I know you're not asking me the question that you asked Mai, but I do want to just quickly answer as to the thing that I've learned. And I think for me, it's very basic, which is just listen first. And as a consequence, I don't think a knowledge hierarchy exists because we think of the people that we work with as experts of their own experience. We are not the experts at all. We know about tech, we know about design, but when we are speaking to, these health navigators in Channapatna, or like, I spend the whole day talking to ASHA workers who are like the frontline workers who pretty much saved a lot of India from COVID. I am not the expert. They have done these incredible things, and they are telling us, how they've done them. All we're doing is offering the potential for them to design a toolkit or I don't want to use the word solution, but a kind of a way for them to make their work last, be found by the right people, be protected from the wrong people, so to speak. When we are conceiving of these digital possibilities with these communities, what we're doing is saying that this is one way in which you might be able to kind of store or disseminate or produce certain kinds of new forms of knowledges using digital tools. And I think something that's really exciting for us is that I don't think what we do is incredibly difficult, right? Like, if you're somebody who is seeing technology around you all the time and you're seeing designed artifacts, you have some sense of what this is, right? And what I think is really interesting is that the people that we work with have imaginations of what tech could be like. They don't know how to execute it, and that's fine. That's where we come in, right? But they have an idea of, like we were just talking about this today, that the kind of women that Naveen works with in Channapatna, how they have kind of mastered the idea of metadata as you know, kind of as content around the interviews that we've done with them, etc. And like how to describe them, you know, how to ensure that they're in the right order chronologically. These are all things that they have made sense of themselves. It's not really things we've told them. I think something that we do in India really well is using technology in unintended ways. So like the most famous example of this is the idea of the missed call, right? Like, so it used to cost money to receive calls. So people just used to give a missed call to say, you're downstairs or whatever, right? Like it was a way of hacking the system that was not the intended way that the technology was designed. And that happens all the time, every day in India. Like the way that people use tech is just kind of in bizarre ways that it's not meant to be, it's not designed to be. And like the other spaces where we see this is other places in the global south, right? Like, so you've got Ernesto Rosa talks about, you know, technological disobedience, right? Like the way that Cubans kind of hack tech and, you know, use tech. And what is interesting is that none of these, or most of these cases, are not people saying, hey, I'm like hacking the system. They're just like, this is what I have, this is what's available to me. I could do this. And that I could do this is often astounding to me, like the things that people think of doing, right? So I think it just comes back to listening and actually hoping that you can do the best by them, right? Like if they have a certain kind of imagination of how something should be, to kind of make sure that it kind of meets that, you know, kind of requirement or that vision. The best you can.
Thank you for taking time, Padmini and Mai. And we're so happy to have you as a part of the first episode. And if you've not seen the website already, please have a look at publicdomain.garden.
Hope everyone enjoyed the talk. See you soon on the next episode.